Morning. Today, the House Oversight Committee will continue to examine the consequences of reckless and dangerous sanctuary policies that jeopardize public safety. 3 sanctuary state governors from Minnesota, New York, and Illinois are here to testify under oath about why they allow criminal illegal aliens to roam free in American communities. Let me be clear. Sanctuary policies do not protect Americans. They protect criminal illegal aliens. That is a fact that the Abraham family knows all too well. With us today is the father of Katie Abraham, Joe, and Katie's stepmother, Michelle. In January of this year, Katie was tragically killed in a car crash near the University of Illinois in Urbana. Urbana, like the state of Illinois, is a sanctuary jurisdiction. Katie's killer was a previously deported criminal illegal alien who was driving drunk. He fled the scene and the jurisdiction and was later apprehended by the U.S. Marshal Service in Texas. Katie was just 20 years old. She had a bright future ahead of her that was stolen from her and her very loving family. The illegal alien who took Katie's life should never have been allowed into our country. This was a preventable crime. Unfortunately, there are too many instances where criminal illegal aliens have harmed Americans. Behind me are photos of some of the many criminal illegal aliens that have been captured in Illinois, Minnesota, and New York. These criminals have been convicted of crimes, including vehicular homicide of a woman, sexual abuse of children, slashing a victim with a machete, and carjacking, among many other crimes. It's absolutely sickening that sanctuary jurisdictions seek to protect these criminals rather than protect Americans. Instead of putting America first, the Biden-Harris administration deliberately dismantled the border security to unleash the worst border disaster in American history. Their radical policies allowed millions of illegals to flood into our country. Americans voted to end the Biden border crisis, and President Trump has delivered on his promise to secure the border. He has taken bold, decisive action to restore our sovereignty and make America safer with each passing day. And here in Congress, we are working to pass the One Big Beautiful Bill to fund U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement so it can carry out the mass deportation of criminal illegal aliens. Despite President Trump's efforts to secure the border and enforce the law, Democrat-run sanctuary cities and states are siding with illegal aliens. For today's Democrat Party, it seems unlimited illegal immigration isn't a failure of policy, it is the policy. And that agenda is being pushed at every level of government. And this comes at a steep cost to public safety, strains law enforcement resources, and imposes a massive financial burden on both federal and state taxpayers. That's not just bad policy, it is a serious oversight failure. Congress must confront this absurd reality. State and local officials are actively undermining federal immigration enforcement, even when it's aimed at making their own communities safer. It's time to determine what legislative action is needed to stop this subversion and restore the rule of law. It's growing more and more absurd every day. In recent weeks, we've witnessed a Democrat senator who traveled to a foreign country for a wellness check on a foreign MS-13 gang member and now indicted human smuggler that ended with a photo op and margaritas on the rocks. The fervor among Democrats who take the side of illegal alien criminals grew so strong that I even had to deny a written request from members of this very committee to go on a taxpayer-funded junket to visit with this same MS-13 gang member. Earlier this year, I launched an investigation into the radical pro-illegal immigration policies of sanctuary jurisdictions. At an oversight committee hearing with some of our country's worst sanctuary city mayors earlier this year, the public was able to clearly see how they care more about illegal aliens than their own citizens. They have pledged not to cooperate with federal law enforcement officials, not even to hand over criminals in their custody who were originally arrested by their own local law enforcement officials for crimes. The absurdity does not stop there. Several of those local officials pointed the finger to laws and policies that their state governments put in place. I invited these governors here today because, as the chief executives of their states, they willfully ignore federal law, shield illegal aliens, and pass the cost of free services onto their hardworking taxpayers. It's hard to figure out whose side these governors are on. They shield criminals while their own citizens pay the price. Just a few weeks ago, Minnesota Governor Walz stood at a commencement podium and smeared ICE agents as, quote, Trump modern-day Gestapo, end quote. Comparing brave law enforcement officers who risk their lives to uphold federal law to Nazi thugs is not just wrong, it's vile and disgusting. I can only hope this reckless remark was not meant to incite violence. Assaults on ICE officers are already up 400% compared to this time last year. And we have witnessed repeated attempts at obstruction and assaults against federal law enforcement recently captured on video in California. Governor Hochul's sanctuary policies cost taxpayers billions to house, feed, and provide driver's license for illegal aliens while the cost to rent rises and hospitals are overrun. Her defiance of federal law invites crime to plague communities across the state. Governor Pritzker faces lawsuits for obstructing ICE as he turns cities like Chicago into havens for drugs and crime. He's yet another governor providing free care to illegal aliens that many of his own citizens lack. These governors handcuff law enforcement from doing their jobs, harbor predators, and call it compassion. It's not compassion, and it's costing lives, hurting Americans, and draining taxpayer money. Congress must consider whether to defund every single penny of federal dollars going to cities and states that prioritize criminal, illegal aliens over the American people. Americans want to return to common sense. The Trump administration and this Republican Congress aims to restore our safety and sovereignty. It's past time for these governors to put America first. I now yield to Ranking Member Lynch for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to thank our witnesses. Governor Walz, good to see you again. Governor Pritzker, Governor Hochul, good to see you again. Ms. Perryman, thank you for your willingness to come before this committee and help us with our work. At this very moment, as we sit in this hearing and at the order of President Trump, the National Guard are on the streets of Los Angeles and active duty Marines are on their way. At Trump's order, Californians are now forced to navigate an active military zone in their midst as they try to go to work or decide if it's safe to send their kids to school. And because of Trump, no American city or state is safe as he lays this groundwork to take his militarization playbook nationwide. 2 days ago, he confirmed that he is considering invoking the Insurrection Act to expand the deployment of active-duty military forces against civilians across this country, preparing for a future in which dissent is met with armed force and the machinery of war is turned inward on the American people. If unchecked, this marks not just a threat to our most sacred civil liberties, but a violent blow to American democracy itself. Last week in Los Angeles, peaceful Americans came out to protest the administration's cruel and illegal mass deportation operations in their neighborhoods. President Trump inflamed events on the grounds as an excuse to unleash the U.S. military on its own people, sending in 4,000 National Guard members without the approval of the governor. They chose Boston because it's a place of intellectual freedom and respect for cultural freedom. And that trust was apparently misplaced. Ms. Ozturk's a Turkish national on a student visa to attend Tufts University. A video of that incident shows Ozturk walking along a public street in Boston, Massachusetts, my home city, when several masked figures just snatched her phone and backpack, handcuffed her, and hustled her into an unmarked vehicle. What's that sound like? What does that sound like? The Trump administration is putting extremism, cruelty, and chaos over protecting kids and families. Trump isn't focused on getting violent criminals off our streets. He's terrorizing our communities to fulfill deportation quotas with fathers and mothers, grandparents, and kids. And he's trying to strong-arm our city and state leaders to divert their limited resources away from serious public safety threats to instead focus on peaceful, law-abiding families, just as he has diverted federal resources away from combating drug trafficking, violent crime, and terrorism to fuel his lawless mass deportation campaign. Trump isn't trying to protect us. He's trying to divide us. It's us and them. He's trying to divide us. And some people are helping him. He's pitting neighbor against neighbor. But it's not immigrant kids who are about to kick millions of Americans off their health care. It's not them. And he's doing that to pay for a tax break for billionaires. And it's not immigrants who are using the military to silence Americans exercising their right to speak truth to power. These are not the strong and measured actions of the leader of a free country. They are the ruthless maneuvers of an aspiring autocrat hell-bent on consolidating power by any means necessary. This is disgraceful. It should not happen in this country. This is wrong. Deploying the military against a civilian population is wrong. And if we don't step up, this will continue. If we don't step up and declare what is right under our Constitution, then other cities, other citizens will meet this same fate. I'm proud of my Democratic colleagues who are willing to stand up to this thuggery. Trump is a wannabe gangster, and he's showing the world what he's about. And I'm proud. You know, my dad served in the Second World War. He fought the Nazis in Northern Africa. He fought the Nazis on the Italian peninsula. And I think he's looking down right now and he's happy that I'm fighting today's Nazis. He's proud of that. We all should be. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Without objection, Representatives Stauber, Finstead, Fishback, Emmer, Morrison, and Craig of Minnesota, Representatives Miller, LaHood, Davis, and Ramirez of Illinois, Representatives Stefanik, Tenney, Lawler, Goldman, Ocasio-Cortez, Gillen of New York, and Moskowitz of Florida are waived onto the committee for the purpose of questioning the witnesses at today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. Our witnesses today include the governors of 3 states. We want to welcome you all here. First, we have Tim Walz, governor of the state of Minnesota. He was sworn into office on January 7th, 2019. His second term began on January 2nd, 2023. Governor, welcome back to the House of Representatives. Next, we have J.B. Pritzker, governor of the state of Illinois. He was sworn into office on January 14th, 2019. His second term began on January 9th, 2023. I'm going to yield briefly to my colleague Raj Krishnamurthy for further introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for yielding. In Illinois, we like our pizza deep, our politics lively, and our budgets balanced. The last one used to be a miracle before Governor Pritzker took office. I know firsthand, as the son of immigrants who realized the American dream in Illinois, that immigrants make enormous contributions to our country. Governor Pritzker understands that too. His great-grandfather fled pogroms in Ukraine in 1881 and settled in Chicago to build a better life. That legacy has shaped his lifelong commitment to public service, justice, and opportunity. Before entering public office, Governor Pritzker built a successful business career and became a leading philanthropist, supporting early childhood education and establishing the Illinois Holocaust Museum. Governor Pritzker has delivered historic investments in education, workforce training, infrastructure, technology, and clean energy, all while expanding paid leave, raising the minimum wage, and defending the rights of all Illinoisans. Governor, thank you for your leadership and for joining us today.
Yield back. Next, we have Kathy Hochul, governor of the state of New York. She was sworn into office on August 24th, 2021. Welcome, Governor. And finally, we have Skye Perryman. She is the president and CEO of the Democracy Forward Foundation. Thank you all for joining us. Look forward to your discussion this afternoon. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please raise their right hand. Please stand and raise your right hand. Do you all solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please let the record show that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Thank you all, and you may take a seat. We appreciate you being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we have read your written statement and they will appear in full in the hearing record. Please limit your oral statement to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it's on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes have expired, and we would ask that you please wrap up. I now recognize Governor Walz for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Lynch, and members of the committee. I'm proud to be here today as the governor of the great state of Minnesota. Wherever you go in this country, people tend to want the same basic things: safe neighborhoods, affordable household goods, meaningful work, good schools. That's what my administration has worked to ensure for our people, and that's what we've delivered. Under our leadership, Minnesota has been ranked the 4th best state to live in, the 2nd best state to raise a family in, and the 3rd best state for jobs. And when it comes to serious crime, Minnesota has hit its lowest level in over 3 decades, and we consistently have lower violent crime rates than the U.S. average. Now, we have a broken immigration system in this country. I think everyone in this room agrees with that. But nothing Minnesota has done to serve its own people stands in the way of the federal government managing border security and policies. While you've convened this hearing to explore the issue of so-called sanctuary states, Minnesota is not even a sanctuary state. Minnesota legislature has passed no such bill making Minnesota a sanctuary state, and I have signed no such law. Minnesota cooperates with federal authorities in a number of ways. When there's a convicted felon in our prisons, we ask about their immigration status and share that information with the Department of Homeland Security. We also cooperate with Homeland Security requests when there's a judicial warrant and when due process has been afforded by our Constitution has been served. But enforcing immigration law is not the role of local and state governments. The fact is, Congress has given federal agencies the authority to enforce immigration laws across this country. That includes Minnesota, and I support them doing so. It's the federal government's job to secure the border. That's why when I was in Congress, I visited the southern border and voted for bills that would have increased funding for Border Patrol, made it easier to hire qualified agents, and deployed advanced technologies to the border. Most importantly, I recognize that securing our border does not mean we sacrifice our constitutional values. Unfortunately, the cruel and misguided policies of this current administration fail to live up to those values. Minnesotans are angry with what they've seen happen to their neighbors. They're angry that the federal government has been snatching people up, putting them in prison, and deporting them without a shred of due process. There's been no notice, no meaningful opportunity to object, and according to the president, no way to get out of these overseas prisons once you end up there. And let's be clear, many of these are law-abiding Americans, people who have been granted asylum or promised protected status. In many cases, it seems these people were reported not based on a criminal behavior, but how they looked or what they've said and being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Even U.S. citizens, like a 4-year-old boy with cancer, sent to Mexico, away from his father, away from the medical needs, to a country he was not born in or had never been to. Americans deserve a sensible, humane, and effective immigration policy that reduces illegal immigration while protecting fundamental rights. Meanwhile, the administration continues to make life worse for hardworking Americans in a lot of other ways, trying to slash Medicaid, Social Security, Medicare, making basic household goods more expensive, and telling people they just need to do more with less. The American people deserve better. You all have the power to legislate, to investigate this administration's abuse and overreach, and protect the American people. And I have to say I'm disappointed. At a crucial inflection point in our nation's history, Congress is choosing to spend its time trying to cast blames on states like Minnesota that have no hand in creating this crisis. While we may disagree on the best way to maintain border security and public safety, I know we should all be able to agree on a few principles: that everyone in America deserves due process, and that we live in a free country where people should not be locked up for exercising their basic constitutional rights. I hope you'll join me in enforcing accountability to those fundamental ideas, and I look forward to your questions. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I now recognize Governor Pritzker for his opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, members of the committee, good morning, and thank you for inviting me. As governor of the great state of Illinois, I have seen firsthand how states have had to shoulder the consequences of a broken immigration system. I'm proud of how we have responded by promoting public safety, treating people with dignity, supporting our economy, and respecting the rule of law. Safe and compassionate immigration policies, I believe, are vital. In fact, my own family owes everything to this country accepting a young refugee named Nicholas Pritzker to its shores over a century ago. My great-grandfather fled the massacre of Jews in Ukraine and arrived in the United States when he was just 10, without a penny to his name. A social service agency provided him a place to live, a public school taught him English, a public university allowed him to pursue a higher education. My father and grandfather both were naval officers and raised their families with a powerful sense of duty to community and patriotism to our country that still lives deep in my generation. Both were successful entrepreneurs. My family story is not unique. Today, Illinois is home to 1.9 million immigrants. Just like my great-grandfather, they are hardworking, raising families, and paying taxes. Our state and our country have been strengthened by people from across the globe seeking freedom, opportunity, and refuge here. Recently, children, pregnant women, and others fled poverty, violence, and persecution, seeking asylum at our border. Some border state politicians chose to treat them as political pawns, busing them to states like mine and dropping them off in the dead of night in the freezing cold. Illinois chose a different path. Faced with a humanitarian crisis, our state made sure children and families did not go hungry or freeze to death. By doing so, we helped to maintain safety and order in Chicago. As governor, one of my responsibilities is to keep the public safe. That is why I expanded our state police, banned assault weapons and ghost guns to take guns out of the hands of criminals, and invested more than ever before in violence prevention. As a result, violent crime is down in Illinois, and Chicago ended 2024 with its lowest homicide rate in 5 years. As I have consistently said, violent criminals have no place on our streets, and if they are undocumented, I want them out of Illinois and out of our country. And as we are reminded in Los Angeles this week, we can all agree that violence of any kind, whomever it is directed at, is unacceptable. People must be held accountable to the law. Illinois follows the law, but let me be clear, we expect the federal government to follow the law too. We will not participate in abuses of power. We will not violate court orders. We will not ignore the Constitution. We will not defy the Supreme Court. We will not take away people's rights to peacefully protest. We also respect, and expect this administration to respect, the traditions and legal precedent that dictate how and when our National Guard and military are deployed. As governor, I've had to make the difficult decision to call the Illinois National Guard into service. I have always done it in partnership with my local governments and law enforcement, and with deep and abiding respect for the sacrifice I was asking of our volunteer armed forces. It's wrong to deploy the National Guard and active duty Marines into an American city over the objection of local law enforcement, just to inflame a situation and create a crisis. Just as it's wrong to tear children away from their homes and their mothers and fathers who have spent decades living and working in our communities, raising their families. Besides being a father and husband, the greatest honor of my life has been serving as governor. I believe with my whole heart that Illinois is the best place in the country to live, work, and to raise a family. Illinoisans take seriously their responsibility in upholding the most fundamental values of our nation, values like kindness, empathy, hard work, and fair play. Our people embody the most American ideal of all, that where your life began matters far less than the dreams you can realize here for yourself and your family. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes Governor Hochul for her opening statement.
Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Lynch, and members of this committee, as we speak, An American city has been militarized over the objections of their governor. At the outset, I just want to say that this is a flagrant abuse of power and nothing short of an assault on our American values. My views on immigration are simple and direct. Our nation needs secure borders. Our nation needs comprehensive immigration reform from this body. And our state laws dictate that we cooperate with ICE in criminal cases. And our values dictate that we treat all law-abiding people with dignity and respect. The America I believe in is a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants. Abandoning either threatens the very foundation on which this great country was built. You know, for 400 years, New York has prospered because of the hard work of these people, these newcomers. People like my grandfather who fled great poverty in Ireland. Grandma and Grandpa had the same American dream that the immigrants today have. I see it in their eyes. They're not here for handouts. They're not here to take advantage of the situation. They're here to work. They want to contribute, earn their place, raise their families. Yet, every day there's another story of children being ripped from the arms of their mothers, wives separated from their husbands, families arrested while attending legal immigration appointments. You know, not long ago in a small town known as Sackett's Harbor in upstate New York, masked and armed ICE agents stormed into a home before dawn. They abducted a mother, her 3 children, including a 3rd grader. They were cast into a living hell in a detention facility in Texas. I immediately contacted Border Czar Tom Homan and demanded their release. In Jefferson County, more than 60% of the residents voted for Donald Trump. And those people protested in the streets. Local Republican lawmakers, business owners, school leaders all spoke out. Finally, after 2 long weeks, the family was finally returned home. In New York, we understand the difference between going after criminals and traumatizing law-abiding families. Now, some of you will use this hearing to stoke fear. I'm here to talk about the facts. New York has managed an unprecedented immigrant influx because of a broken border. Yet at the same time, our state has become stronger and safer. Today, New York has the lowest homicide rate among the nation's top 10 states. We didn't achieve this with indiscriminate roundups, not by tearing apart innocent families, but by investing $2.6 billion in public safety, engaging in smart, targeted policing, and partnering with law enforcement, federal law enforcement, to apprehend and deport serious criminals. And since I've become governor, we've cooperated in handing over 1,300 convicted criminals to ICE. But what we don't do is civil immigration enforcement. That's the federal government's job. New Yorkers need their state troopers on our highways, seizing guns and drugs. States like mine are doing our part, but we can't be expected to fix the broken immigration system. You know, and the very people who go on cable news and rail about the border are the same ones who torpedo bipartisan legislation each and every time. So here's my message. If you truly care about public safety, if you truly care about the economy, if you truly care about human dignity, then sit down, negotiate, have real reform, secure the border, revive legal pathways, and let people work. At the end of the day, I'll go home and do my job keeping New Yorkers safe. I hope that you will do yours. Thank you.
And I now recognize the Democrat witness, Ms. Perryman, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Acting Ranking Member, for having me here today. And at the outset, let me offer my sincerest condolences to all of you for the passing and your loss of your colleague, Representative Jerry Conley. I'm here today as a lawyer and as the president and CEO of Democracy Forward Foundation, which is a national nonpartisan legal organization that is committed to achieving democracy and a nation that enables all people to thrive. At Democracy Forward, we represent people and communities who make up the very fabric of our nation on a pro bono basis in federal and state courts and regulatory bodies throughout the country. I know this is a hearing focused on immigration, and so I would like to say at the outset and echo the calls for bipartisan, comprehensive immigration reform. I will also note that the rhetoric that we have heard the president and his allies use in recent days about immigrants and people in this country is inaccurate, overly politicized, and not solutions-oriented. Fundamentally, Democracy Forward Foundation's work centers on the premise that when the government does its job and delivers for people, our society is stronger. And when our government strays from that purpose, ignoring the Constitution, not achieving and respecting the fidelity of people's rights, our democracy and our people are in danger. Right now, based on the work that we are doing, I am here to say that our American people are in danger and that our democracy is in crisis. I am looking at these United States flags. We need to remember who we are. We right now have a president who has proclaimed without irony that he is a king in a nation that next year will celebrate 250 years since it threw off the reins of monarchy. Since Inauguration Day, the president and his administration have acted beyond the lawful bounds of executive authority. They have usurped the power of this Congress. They have sought to eliminate due process of law. They have ignored court orders, and they are targeting people, civil society organizations, and lawyers. These are anti-democratic actions that present an overall threat to every single American and their well-being and to our values in America. That is why at Democracy Forward Foundation, we have had to go to court to file more than 70 legal actions in federal and state courts and agencies and offices since Inauguration Day to protect the American people's rights. From stopping the president's federal funding freeze, to blocking the decimation of the Department of Education, to having to safeguard due process, to challenging DOJ and Elon Musk's attempts to access personal data on behalf of individual Americans, our team is in court every single day on behalf of people of all identities and ideologies, people in red states and blue states, people in small towns, urban areas, and rural communities. Our work at Democracy Forward demonstrates that the United States Constitution is still here, and it is here for all of us. This administration's tactics with regard to immigration enforcement that we have seen, they shock the conscience. They shock the conscience of the vast majority of the American people, including people who do not see eye to eye on how to fix our immigration problem in this country. They have led us to file and have to file litigation on behalf of religious communities to prevent ICE from entering houses of worship. We are litigating against policies that prolong the detention of individual immigrant children without their families. And of course, we are challenging the lack of due process afforded to our clients, men who were disappeared through an unlawful agreement between the government of El Salvador and the United States Department of State. All told, the courts have ruled against the current administration more than 170 times in less than 200 days because of the fast-moving harms and flagrant violations of the law and of our Constitution. And while this is a dire situation, our work demonstrates that the American people are determined to protect their rights. They are determined to use lawful and peaceful means of petitioning their government and, when necessary, of holding their government accountable. People have talked about their families, and last week was June 6th, which is, of course, the anniversary of when American troops landed on the beaches of Normandy in World War II. I, too, am the mother of a 9-year-old boy, and that 9-year-old boy's great-grandfather served in that battle, and many others throughout the European theater. But as I reflected last week, we don't need to be in Normandy to defend our democracy in June of 2025. We need to be here in these halls, doing the work in courts across the country and in our communities. And we do need to remember the essential and historical commitment that our nation made at the end of that war to advance democracy and to ensure that we never turn our backs on people who are fleeing persecution. I so appreciate you inviting me here today to participate in this hearing, and it is with a sincere hope that we can come together that I offer my testimony and comments.
All right, opening statements have concluded. We're now going to begin the questioning portion of today's testimony. And I'm going to begin with Governor Walz. Governor Walz, I thought that maybe your statement referencing ICE as Gestapo was an outlier statement, but now that Mr. Lynch has endorsed it, it appears that it could be some type of Democrat talking point. Governor, do you and other Democrat politicians understand why referencing ICE as Gestapo is offensive? I'm going to explain. The Department of Homeland Security is reporting that ICE agents are now experiencing a 413% rise in assaults. We've seen numerous videos of rioters obstructing and assaulting federal law enforcement after your remarks, including in Los Angeles. So, Governor, do you think that comments like that and rhetoric like that put ICE officers and other law enforcement in greater danger?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, any attack on law enforcement is unacceptable, wherever it's at, whether it's state, local.
So you understand, and I've got limited time here. I want to highlight for the governors that real-world impact of the policies that you all continue to defend, even in your opening statements, have on American families. Earlier this year in Governor Pritzker's Illinois, a previously deported illegal alien who had re-entered the country was allegedly drunk driving near the University of Illinois when he struck a car sitting at a red light and then fled the scene. The crash killed 2 young women, including Katie Abraham, whose father and stepmother are here today. And this is her poster. Katie had her whole life ahead of her, cut off in an instant. Governor Pritzker, this illegal alien should never have been here. He didn't just flee the scene. He fled the state and was apprehended by federal marshals in Texas using a false name. He now faces criminal charges for reckless homicide, leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death, and driving under the influence resulting in death. And he faces a federal indictment for having a fraudulent permanent resident card, a fraudulent Social Security card, and a fraudulent use of passport. Governor Pritzker, do you agree that this illegal alien who killed Katie should never have been in the United States in the first place?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me express my condolences to the family, and those are terrible circumstances. Let me also say that anyone who commits a crime in the state of Illinois.
I understand, Governor. Should that criminal have been here in the first place? Did he have a right to be in this country illegally?
If the person is a criminal of any sort, then they ought to be.
So
They
that
ought to
person
be
had a right
arrested,
to be
they
in the
ought to
United
be-
States.
They ought to be given their due process rights, and they ought to be convicted. And
The criminal who
Yes.
entered this country illegally, in your testimony, had a right to be in this country.
no, I'm suggesting to you that when and I have responsibility for the state of Illinois, I can tell you that it's the responsibility of the federal government to manage immigration in this country. And if you're suggesting that the federal government didn't do its job, that is up to you.
Let
to
me ask you
determine.
this, Governor.
I can tell you that in the
Do you
state of
believe
Illinois,
that Joe, do
we
you
follow
believe
the
that
law.
President Biden did his job in securing the border?
I was critical of things that President Biden did. I think I've been very public about that. I wrote a letter to the president telling him that.
Okay, thank you. Now back to Governor Walz. You were obviously selected by Vice President Harris to be your running mate in 2024. I'm curious, did you ever ask Vice President Harris about former President Biden's and then President Biden's cognitive decline?
No, not that I can recall, Mr. Chairman.
You saw President Biden's disastrous debate performance. I'm just curious, you never did comment to Vice President Harris like, wow, he may not be on the top of his game. Nothing was ever mentioned to Vice President Harris. And the reason I ask, obviously, is because I know you watch CNN, and other networks have interviewed a lot of people, including Jean-Pierre and Buttigieg and others that have suggested that they were shielded from President Biden and weren't allowed to speak to him, and that his mental decline was obvious. You never discussed that with Vice President Harris?
No, not that I can recall, Chairman. And I, as governor and then being on the ticket, I was probably more concerned with my own debate performance than President Biden's. So no.
Let me ask you this, Governor. Do you believe that the Biden-Harris administration secured the border? You mentioned it's the federal government's role to secure the border to protect Americans from illegals entering the country, I guess. Do you think they did a good job of that?
I think the border has been broken for a very long time through many administrations. It's one of the reasons why Vice President Harris was advocating so strongly for the bipartisan bill that...
Did she mention her role as the border czar any when you all were out campaigning? Or?
Not that I can recall, other than that we talked about the need to pass the bipartisan border legislation that would have done many of the things that, as a governor, I know would have made our jobs easier.
But President Trump secured the border without any legislation. I mean, that was kind of a myth that was in the media and a Democrat talking point that we needed legislation to secure the border. The border's secure.
Everything's fixed?
That's step one. Step two is to deport the criminal illegals, and that's where we're facing obstruction in your all state. So I'm sure there are a lot more questions that will pertain to that. My time's expired. I now recognize Ranking Member Lynch for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's worth saying again that Democrats oppose violence and lawlessness in all its forms. I do want to point out that the vast majority of protesters have been peaceful. But the most egregious and sweeping displays of the use of force and lawlessness we see in the United States today, and the gravest threat to the rights and freedoms of those that we hold dear, are the acts of the Trump administration itself. President Trump and his administration have crossed the line over and over again, from January 6th, when this building was attacked at his direction, to invoking the Alien Enemies Act, to dismantling USAID, to ignoring court orders, to the attacks and threats against law firms that were protecting democracy. As in the 5 months since Trump took office and put the for sale sign over the White House, he's earned $2.9 billion on his crypto scam. I mean, to call this unprecedented, that word has lost all its meaning. He keeps making history, but the wrong kind. Just the act of sending the National Guard and troops and active duty Marines to L.A. was already an overreach. Supposedly, now we hear reports that those soldiers and Marines were sent to quell protests, but now are detaining civilians and are being trained to perform immigration enforcement functions. Ms. Perryman, what else could go wrong with the National Guard and Marines deployed in L.A.? What are the risks to the Americans who live, work, and exercise their right to freedom and to free speech there?
Well, I would just say that what our Constitution recognizes and how good government functions is really based on trust. And when we look at National Guards, it is the governors that often call the National Guards in. And so, of course, the fact that we are seeing a situation where the president has taken this step without cooperating with the governor and with local communities there is deeply concerning. And, of course, we know from history that could lead to escalations and could lead to violence that is really problematic for all of our communities across the country, including in Los Angeles.
Thank you. Ms. Perryman, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has talked about the deployment order, and he testified that this order, and I'm quoting him, this order is getting ahead of a problem so that if in other places, if there are other riots in places where law enforcement officers are threatened, we would have the capability to surge the National Guard there if necessary. Ms. Perryman, how does the President's broad order and the presumption before the fact that military force would be deployed, how does that pose a threat to other cities across the country?
Well, again, it appears to be an escalation. And the main thing that's really important to so many Americans across the country, as well as local law enforcement in so many areas, that local law enforcement is there to help people be able to peacefully protest. And so there are ways that people in this country can express their views. We don't all agree with each other. And right now you really see the White House, for whatever reason, I think escalating, maybe seeking to create some made-for-TV moments. It's not clear. But I do think that there is a lot at stake here, as you've heard this morning.
Thank you. I want to ask each of the governors, this is a general question, how could each of the governors answer briefly how President Trump's policies, his assaults on the rule of law and his interjection of military force into California, how that would threaten your states, especially where Secretary Hegseth has said that he would support that expansion? Mr. Walz, Governor?
Well, Thank you, Ranking Member Lynch. Well, first of all, it's one of the federalism policy of this, especially when it comes to posse comitatus and the Insurrection Act. Governors are in charge. Our National Guard, as all of you know, serve in either Title 10 or Title 32 status under the role of governor. Right. And on all of these operations, the absolute pinnacle and the most critical piece is the coordination amongst them. And as a governor not being notified as local law enforcement, it creates a chaotic situation that they cannot operate as a joint unit. And governors are always there. We do it for floods. We do it for civil unrest. But doing it without causes immense danger, not citizens to, but to those very law enforcement officers who are then put in that chaotic situation.
Thank you. Governor Pritzker?
Local law enforcement are the ones who indicate to the governor or to their local officials who talk to the governor about their need for National Guard. And indeed, I've had that situation in the state of Illinois and called out the Guard when I needed to. I'm careful about when I do it, but again, when local law enforcement indicate that they want that backup or they need that support, we do it. Now, I have to say, when the President of the United States is calling out your National Guard over the top of local law enforcement saying that they don't need it, that they have things under control, it tends to have an inflaming effect on what's going on the ground, just when local law enforcement and officials are getting things under control. And I think that's what we saw in Los Angeles.
Governor Hochul?
Those actions absolutely undermine the sovereignty of individual states. States' governors are the commanders in chief of the National Guard. They know what to do. As you've heard from my colleagues, we have deployed them in a number of occasions. But undermining confidence in local law enforcement, you're basically saying that there's not a belief that the highly trained individuals of our municipal police departments, like Los Angeles and the city of New York, for example, can't handle their jobs. I have more confidence in our law enforcement than perhaps the president does, and we ought to step back and say this is an overreach of epic proportions.
Thank you. Chair recognizes.
Thank you for your courtesy on the time. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Ms. Stefanik from New York.
Thank you. Governor Hochul, on your first day in office, you signed Executive Order 1. Is that correct?
I believe it is.
And you extended this executive order not once, not twice, but 3 times, most recently January 16th of this year. Is that correct?
If that's what your facts show, I signed countless executive orders.
I would
and
assume you'd
policies
know
and
it's
laws.
Executive Order 1. And this is a continuation of your predecessor's sanctuary state policies, correct? Is included in that.
I want to be sure we are defining sanctuary state properly.
I'll define it for you. It is the policy of the state that state officers or employees shall not disclose information to federal immigration authorities for the purpose of federal civil immigration enforcement. It goes on to say, law enforcement officers may not use resources, equipment, or personnel for the purpose of detecting and apprehending any individual suspected or wanted for violating a civil immigration office. Law enforcement officers have no authority in the state of New York to take any policy action solely because the person is an undocumented alien. That's a quote in your executive orders that you extended. Now, do you know who Sakir Akan is?
I want to get back to the first part
No,
of
I'm
your
asking a question. Do you know who Sakir Akan is?
I want to make sure you understand that this simply says that we will cooperate with ICE.
No,
in
it does
all-
not say that. I read what it
We will
says, and let me talk to you about the results. Do you know who Sakir Akan is? You should, as the governor of New York State. Do you know?
Refresh my recollection.
He was an illegal migrant in New York. And do you know what crime he committed in addition to being here illegally?
No, I do not.
You do not. This was widely reported. He found a 15-year-old girl, threatened her with a metal pole, told her to get into the back seat of his car. He took her clothes off, and he violently raped her in Albany, New York. Do you know who Sebastian Zepeda Khalil is?
I'm sure you'll tell me there's many cases, whether they're
These are
here-
high-profile cases.
Yes.
New Yorkers know about them, and you don't. So let's talk about Sebastian Zepeda Khalil. Do you know who that is?
I don't have the specific details at my disposal, no.
Well, this is an illegal migrant in New York because of your sanctuary state policies. Do you know what crime he committed?
I'm not familiar at this moment.
I bet you're going to be familiar when I remind you. He found a sleeping woman on the subway, lit her on fire, and burned her alive. This is in Kathy Hochul's New York. And as I'm sure you are aware, and I'll remind you, that ICE issued an order to detain this violent criminal, but that was rejected by New York officials due to sanctuary state laws. Now, Do you know who Raymond Rojas Basilio is?
I just want to say this. These crimes are horrific.
Because of
condemn
your
them,
because of
and I
your
would say
sanctuary state policies.
In all of these cases, we would work with ICE to remove
You
them.
did not in this case. They are
If they need
walking
our
on the
assistance.
streets because of your policies and your executive order that you signed 3 times. Now, Raymond Rojas Basilio, do you know who that is?
I'm telling you this. I will
You don't know
explain to
who
you
it
the
is.
policies of New York. We cooperate with, I know you're just
You do
trying
not.
to.
You do not. Specifically,
miss-
ICE was told not to detain this individual, and he burned a woman alive on the New York subways in Kathy Hochul's New York. So I will keep on going. What about Raymond Rojas Basilio? Do you know who that is?
I'm going to tell you our overall policy, which will address all this.
I'll tell
We
you
do
who
not-
that is. He is an illegal who molested an 11-year-old in our state because, again, of your sanctuary state policies. This illegal was shielded from federal immigration enforcement and able to commit this heinous crime. And what about Wilson Castillo Diaz? Do you know who that
I am
is?
telling you this. We do cooperate fully with ICE in criminal prosecution. Our sanctuary
You're not advocating for
regulations
these victims.
only deal with
This is a
civil
5-year-old who
enforcement.
was raped
Civil
on Long
enforcement.
Island in Nassau County. You are not advocating on behalf of these victims. You are shielding illegals. Even in your opening statement,
That is
you
not true.
prioritize putting illegals first.
That is not
Rapes
true.
of young girls, beatings of NYPD cops by illegals who are here under Kathy Hochul's failed policies, burning New Yorkers alive. This is Kathy Hochul's New York. It's one of the many reasons why you're hemorrhaging support from hardworking New York
These are
families.
horrific crimes, and they're
They're
heartbreaking.
horrific crimes that are committed on your watch. You signed this executive order on your first day in office. You signed it again and again this January. We deserve a governor who stands up for law-abiding New Yorkers, doesn't put illegals first, but actually puts New Yorkers first. I appreciate
Rather than
the
going
chairman's-
after the viral moment, I suggest you
No,
look
no,
at
no.
the facts.
I'm standing up for New Yorkers.
No.
Rather than addressing the illegals in New York, you are prioritizing your far-left sanctuary state policies, which you put in place with executive orders. Instead of advocating for
cooperate
victims,
in all
a
those
5-year-old
cases.
who
We
was raped,
cooperate with ICE.
you did not. They were released
We
because
cooperate
of
with
sanctuary
ICE.
state
We
policies in New
cooperate
York
with
State.
law
No
enforcement.
amount of words is going to clean up your failed record and these horrific crimes committed in sanctuary state that you created. And with that, I
You
yield back.
represent-
Good morning. Today, the House Oversight Committee will continue to examine the consequences of reckless and dangerous sanctuary policies that jeopardize public safety. 3 sanctuary state governors from Minnesota, New York, and Illinois are here to testify under oath about why they allow criminal illegal aliens to roam free in American communities. Let me be clear. Sanctuary policies do not protect Americans. They protect criminal illegal aliens. That is a fact that the Abraham family knows all too well. With us today is the father of Katie Abraham, Joe, and Katie's stepmother, Michelle. In January of this year, Katie was tragically killed in a car crash near the University of Illinois in Urbana. Urbana, like the state of Illinois, is a sanctuary jurisdiction. Katie's killer was a previously deported criminal illegal alien who was driving drunk. He fled the scene and the jurisdiction and was later apprehended by the U.S. Marshal Service in Texas. Katie was just 20 years old. She had a bright future ahead of her that was stolen from her and her very loving family. The illegal alien who took Katie's life should never have been allowed into our country. This was a preventable crime. Unfortunately, there are too many instances where criminal illegal aliens have harmed Americans. Behind me are photos of some of the many criminal illegal aliens that have been captured in Illinois, Minnesota, and New York. These criminals have been convicted of crimes including vehicular homicide of a woman, sexual abuse of children, slashing a victim with a machete, and carjacking, among many other crimes. It's absolutely sickening that sanctuary jurisdictions seek to protect these criminals rather than protect Americans. Instead of putting America first, the Biden-Harris administration deliberately dismantled the border security to unleash the worst border disaster in American history. Their radical policies allowed millions of illegals to flood into our country. Americans voted to end the Biden border crisis, and President Trump has delivered on his promise to secure the border. He has taken bold, decisive action to restore our sovereignty and make America safer with each passing day. And here in Congress, we are working to pass the One Big Beautiful Bill to fund U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement so it can carry out the mass deportation of criminal illegal aliens. Despite President Trump's efforts to secure the border and enforce the law, Democrat-run sanctuary cities and states are siding with illegal aliens. For today's Democrat Party, it seems unlimited illegal immigration isn't a failure of policy, it is the policy. And that agenda is being pushed at every level of government. And this comes at a steep cost to public safety, strains law enforcement resources, and imposes a massive financial burden on both federal and state taxpayers. That's not just bad policy, it is a serious oversight failure. Congress must confront this absurd reality. State and local officials are actively undermining federal immigration enforcement, even when it's aimed at making their own communities safer. It's time to determine what legislative action is needed to stop this subversion and restore the rule of law. It's growing more and more absurd every day. In recent weeks, we've witnessed a Democrat senator who traveled to a foreign country for a wellness check on a foreign MS-13 gang member